Okay, so this is what we're going to be working on today is 3D, only this time true 3D, not 2.5D, but 3D with extrusion. And what I want to show you here is what 3D extrusion looks like. Notice how these letters have depth to them. This text has depth. And you can also see some beautiful little reflections from the lights and so forth. And there's something else in here. We have a layer called an environment layer, and that is reflecting in the text. In our case, it's actually the background layer. It's just a copy that's set up especially as an environment layer. And its only purpose is to reflect in these 3D elements. Now you can do this with text and you can do it with shapes. So if you have a logo, you can convert the logo to shapes and do some really cool stuff. So let's get started with the tutorial. If you try to look at this 3D text file that's been prepared for you, unless you have a super screamer computer, you're going to see that it's taking forever to render. And there are some instructions to follow so that we can preview this easily and make it a lot easier on you to create these files, and then you can render them in full res later. First thing to do, go to the Preview tab, and you probably are going to have to grab the bottom edge and pull it all the way out so that you can see all of the options. We're going to set the frame rate to 15, the skip to, you can put a number in here. I'm saying skip 3, but we could go ahead and do just 2 and that'll be fine. And we'll set the resolution to quarter, really low. Now let's go up to composition settings, and we are using the 3D renderer called Cinema 4D right here, and we're going to go to options and make sure that the number is set really low. I've got a quality of 5 here on this one. We'll click OK. Now this is going to make things look pretty funky. You'll see all these little dots and so forth that are being rendered out in here. This is just a very low res version of our animation. So let's go ahead and create a new composition. And we'll make it 5 seconds long. Let's call this 3D text practice. And we're going to use the HDTV 1080 29.97 preset just like always, and we're going to click OK. Now I want you to drag Jonathan Building background into the timeline. This is an Illustrator file. We're going to go over to Effects and Presets, type in Gaussian Blur, G-A-U-S-S is enough. We'll see Gaussian Blur. Don't use the legacy. That one is too long of a render. So we'll take this one. Let's put it in. Effect controls over here on the upper left. Let's set it to 40 pixels of blur. Now we're going to tick the 3D switch here. And I want you to type P for position. And we'll push it back about 800 pixels in Z space and depth. And let's scale it up to 300%. There we go. Let's go ahead and set our views to 2 views. And it should remember from the last time that you want active camera on the right and custom view 1 on the left. Now we're going to duplicate this layer. Control or Command D. And on the bottom one, we're going to right click and choose Environment Layer. Environment layers are invisible. All they do is reflect in 3D objects. Again, that would be text or shapes. Something created with the pen tool or the shapes tool, or something that was converted to a shape. Next, we're going to double click on the type tool, and I'm going to drag this to the top of the stack here. Make the changes that you need to make over here. I want you to do a medium gray, 70% brightness, no color, no hue, no saturation. I've got mine set to 250 pixels, and I'm using a big blocky font, Franklin Gothic Heavy. And the reason for choosing this for me is I wanted plenty of surface area to reflect this beautiful stuff that we see here. We see it in our background layer, but really it's coming from the environment layer. And I'll go ahead and start typing here some kind of a slogan. Where's the beef? Probably nobody here remembers that. It's an old commercial from the 70s. Now, if we click on this layer and use the selection tool, what we want to see is that the anchor point is absolutely in the center. This one is not. So in order to perfectly center the anchor point, we're going to hold Command Alt or Control Alt if you're on a PC, Control Alt Home, and you'll see that the anchor point goes to the absolute horizontal and vertical center. Now, just in case you didn't have the text centered, we need the text to be centered in the paragraph tab here. And now we'll go to the Align tab and click horizontal and vertical centering. It's going to make a very slight adjustment, but it's going to make that text perfectly in the center of the screen. Now we can tick the 3D switch. We had to wait until now to do that. Now, because our composition is set as, I should have showed this before, but in the 3D renderer, because we're set up using the Cinema 4D renderer, we are going to be able to use Extrusion. And I want you to type AA on the text layer. And what that's going to do, let me scooch this up for a second, is show you all of the geometry and material options. Let's go ahead and set the bevel depth to 5 and the extrusion depth to, I don't know, I'm going to do 40. We'll leave cast shadows off. Let's set the bevel style to angular. We're going to set the ambient light to 50. The ambient is the base light in the scene. We want to kind of mute that a little bit. Diffuse, we will leave that set to 50. Diffusion is how it's going to reflect in the surface of the text. Specular intensity and shininess, we're going to punch all the way up to 100. Speculars are the little glints of light that are going to reflect in the text. It's kind of like the glint in your eyes. Exactly like that, actually. We're going to set metal to 0. We're going to set the reflection intensity to 100 and reflection sharpness to 80. And finally, reflection roll-off to 25%. And already, you're starting to see there's some kind of cool stuff going on in the text here. I'm going to go ahead and pull this back down. We'll twirl up the layer by pressing U. And now we're going to add some lights. So we're going to go up to Layer, New, Light. We're going to set it to a point light. I'm going to name it Key Light. And using the color picker right here, the eyedropper, let's go over and grab this sort of a cyan color right here. And we'll set the intensity to 200% intensity. That's a lot for a light, but we're going to need it in this scene. Make sure that Cast Shadows is turned on. We'll click OK. Now we're going to move the slide a little bit. So we're going to press the P key. Now you could do this with the gimbal right here if you want. And it's okay to kind of get used to using this gimbal. We're going to grab X here. If you click right on the arrow of the red line here, you can pull it over. And using Y, the green one, click on the little arrowhead, and we're just going to pull it down a little bit. We may come back and adjust that later. Let's go ahead and duplicate the key light. Command or Control D. Let's rename it backlight. And on the left side over here, I want you to grab now the blue arrowhead and push it back into Z space. We don't want to go very far. Now this is tricky. It's hard to really know by looking at this. I can't tell if I'm on top of the text or behind it. So it's a little bit tricky here. Just for fun, let's type P for position. Let's see where the position of the text is in terms of depth. It's 0. Well, let's see what we did on the backlight. I'm going to type P for position, and it shows that we are 755, 756 pixels into the background. We can come back some, and we'll pull it to the left some. Maybe a little higher. Yeah, let's keep going to the left too. There we go, something like that. And let's go ahead and change the color of this light. So we can do that in several ways. We can go ahead and use our friend the AA shortcut, and we can change the color of the light here. I want something contrasting, so click on the color chip, and we'll pick something sort of in the amberish, yellowish, goldish, lots of ishes, something like that. Just want something to contrast. Now I do want to point out to you that it is possible to animate these lights. We can set keyframes for position and animate these guys if you want. I'll show you how to do that, although I don't know that we really want to in this instance, but if you wanted to animate the lights, you could. Okay, it's kind of cool. Maybe I'll leave that in there for now. You could do the same thing on the key light. Maybe you animate it in the opposite direction. One more light to add now. Layer, new, light. This time we're going to set it to an ambient light. This is just the base light in the scene. And we're going to call this fill light. And let's set it to a white color. And the intensity, let's bring that down to maybe 50. We might even go to 25 later. Click OK. Now let's add an effect to the text. If we go to Effects and Presets, I'll go ahead and click the X here to clear that out. The text animation presets are hiding under Animation Presets, Text, and here's all the different ones. We've talked about this before, but I want to show you the shortcut here. I want you to go up and click on these 3 lines right here in the right of the Effects and Presets panel, and I want you to go to Browse Presets. And it's going to take a minute, but it's going to launch Adobe Bridge. And now we'll see Adobe Bridge. Wow, these are little small folders and big windows for them. I'm just going to push it back a little bit here. We have the same folder structure as over here. So we're looking for text, double click, and we're going to go to 3D text. Any of these will work, by the way, but we're going to use 3D text for this. And you can click on any of these and see a preview over on the right. See here. So you just need to find one that you like. I use this one called 3D Lines Zoom In. I don't know, that just seems not too showy. This is kind of a cool one here, 3D Fly Down. But all I'm going to do, since my text layer is chosen, actually it's not chosen, is it? I got to go back and choose it. There's the text layer. Back to bridge. That's very important because otherwise it's not going to know what to do with this. I'm going to double click and it will apply the effect. Now if for some reason it doesn't apply, you can right click and choose way down here at the bottom, place in Adobe After Effects 2022 or whatever version you're using. And we have this text effect that has been applied. Oh, but I made a mistake. I'm all the way at the end of the timeline. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to press Z, Control Z, and I'm going to bring the playhead back to the beginning. Operator error. Going to go back now to bridge, double click again, and we will have an animation. Now we're almost done except for the tweaking part of this exercise. Let's add a camera. Layer, new, camera. And we're going to use the 50mm preset and make sure it's set to 2-node. What's the difference in a 1-node and a 2-node camera? A 1-node camera will do only physical movement of the camera. In other words, dolly, truck, and pedestal. So we can't pan or tilt a 1-node camera, but we're going to set it for 2 nodes so that we have those two axes to work in. I'm going to click OK. And what you'll see here is our camera here and something new that we didn't have last week, and that is this guy. This is called the point of interest, and this is how we can pan or tilt the camera. So we can pan here like so, or tilt the camera like this, or any combination of those. I'm going to undo that because we're really not going to work with that right now. Instead, we're going to physically move the camera, doing a little pedestal and truck move, maybe a little dolly too, but it's going to remain fixated on this point. So no matter where we put the camera, it's always going to look at that point in space. So let's go back to the beginning of the timeline here, and we'll type P. And let's bring the camera over to the left. I'm holding the shift key here. I don't want to go too far because I don't want to see the edges. If you start to see the edges over here, you've panned the camera too far. And I'm going to bring it up a little bit so that we've got a little higher view. Again, watch your edges. Make sure you're not getting too close to the edges over here. We can see how close we are in the lower corner. Let's set a position keyframe here and go to 4 seconds. And we will truck to the right. Again, I'm holding the shift key. Something like that. And we're going to go low. We're going to start looking low with the camera. We want a kind of a low angle look at the text here. Something like that, I think. Wait, there we go. Yeah, that's good. And we're going to push in a little bit to kind of fill the screen with the text. Oh, and by the way, we need to easy ease our keyframes. So select them both, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, just like you always do. And I actually realized I just made a mistake in here. I'm going to go ahead and twirl everything up here because it's getting a little confusing. I'm going to go back to the key light and I'm going to type AA. And I need to set the fall off to none. And that's going to dramatically brighten up the scene. There we go. That's more like it. And we're going to do the same thing to the backlight. Let's twirl that up. AA. Set the fall off to none. And now, wow, that's really too bright. So I'm going to go back to the fill light and bring the intensity back down. I think that's pretty good. So let's render one more time, see how it looks. And that's looking more like it. Notice the reflections of the environment layer in the text. Now that background is pretty bright, and we could change the position of the backlight, and we could also drop the ambient level even more in the background. So, a couple other things I need to tell you about before we get finished here, and that is once you are finished, you're satisfied with the way everything looks, you're going to need to render at a higher resolution. So, you're going to have to go back to the composition settings, go to the 3D renderer, go to options, and crank this up to like 50 and see how you like it. You may decide that you need to go even higher than this. Okay. Now, one warning to you when you get ready to do your next project, whatever that is, uh, it's going to remember your 3D settings from the last time. So if you want classic 3D, you're going to have to go back to composition settings in your new project, okay, and set that to classic 3D. Now, one thing I didn't tell you about, and I should have, is about the work area bar. You can grab the edges of this little bar and you can pull those back to render only a particular piece of the timeline, and that's going to speed things up for you. You come over in this area and press the space bar. All it's going to do is render this area for you to concentrate on. Anytime you have something that's really effects heavy, that's just taking forever to render, this is a handy dandy little thing that you could do. Adjust your work area bar so that you only are rendering this one little piece of space. To reset the work area bar, you're just going to double click. Okay, that's it. Go ahead and get to work on your own project. I'm sure you have something really cool in mind, and I hope you have some fun with this. It's pretty neat, huh? So good luck, have fun, and let me know if you have any questions.